Hello everyone and welcome to the day 2 of Introduction to UNESCO Open Science Framework workshop. So some of you are joining us today, and as I can see from the participant list, some of you have joined us yesterday as well. So welcome back to the returning participants and welcome to everybody who is joining us today. I am your host and moderator for this workshop. My name is Dr. Pragya Chaube. I am India Coordinator to the UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. I am also the co-founder of Open Science South Asia Network. And I'll quickly show you what the program schedule is like. So yesterday we had the first session of the workshop, which was Introduction to Open Science Framework. That was taken by Dr. IISc from UNESCO Beijing. Today we will be discussing about open science infrastructures. Tomorrow we'll be discussing about open engagement of societal actors. And as you can see, day after we will be discussing about open dialogue with other knowledge systems. And on final day, we'll be discussing about open scientific knowledge. So why we are discussing these particular topics is something that we had already covered in the session yesterday, and I will soon come to this right now, like why we have chosen these particular topics for discussion. And for the participants, this is necessary that you need to attend 3 out of 5 sessions to receive a certificate of participation. So please go ahead, have a look at the entire schedule and see what kind of makes more sense to you, what is more useful to you, but please attend at least 3 out of 5 sessions. I would highly recommend you to attend the entire workshop because it will be very interesting and very useful for you. So that is there. And also I would recommend you to engage with the speakers, with the hosts throughout the session. We have try to make it a more interactive. We want to make it as interactive and as interesting for you, as engaging for you as we can. So please help us with that. And these sessions are recorded. So once the workshop is over, all the material would be provided to you, to all the participants. It will be made online and accessible. So very quickly, a recap of day 1. So on day 1, we discussed what is open science, why is it important, what is the UNESCO recommendation on open science says, what are the different pillars of open science, and Dr. IISc also included in her conversation yesterday, in her session yesterday, that how you can actually engage openly and become a voice in this entire ecosystem. This link is where you will actually find the entire recommendation, UNESCO recommendation of open science, which was introduced in 2021. It is available in 4 different languages: English, French, Mandarin, and Arabic. This link we will put in the chat box so you can actually go and have a look at it, read it at your own pace, and try to understand what it says. So very quickly, open science, this is a definition that was given in this recommendation, which was kind of about 194 signatory countries came to this consensus that open science is defined this inclusive construct. It is making scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone. And one of the important pillars is that it is not, even though the name says open science, and a lot of people think that it is for just science, but this applies to all scholarly knowledge and all scholarly practices, including natural, social sciences, and the humanities. And it not only makes science open and accessible to all, but it also aims to open the processes of scientific knowledge to the community, to all the scientific actors, societal actors beyond the scientific community. And this particular open science definition is basically based on the key pillars of open science, which includes open scientific knowledge, open science infrastructures, open engagement of societal actors, and open dialogue with other knowledge systems. Now you know why we are actually unpacking these different pillars through different sessions in our workshop. And today we are discussing about open science infrastructures, which is something that was very much stressed upon in yesterday's talk, in yesterday's session, like how or why they are so important to promote open science. So these are like just some of the benefits as they have been listed in the open science recommendation framework. And for the people who were present yesterday, there was one particular question on how open science practices and open data can actually solve to some extent the crisis of reproducibility in sciences, how it can help. And there, this particular case study was discussed, like what happens when science is closed. So this particular case study basically talks about this one particular paper where the data was only processed data was available, raw data was not available, and it was on climate modeling. And when environmentalists, when researchers put out this paper and nobody could actually reproduce this study, policymakers came to understanding that we do not understand environment or climate crisis well enough to make any environmental policy changes. It was only many years later that some problems were identified, that original data was, that could be accessed. And people were able to rerun the entire analysis to suggest, no, that paper was faulty. There were some problems with that analysis, and we need some major environmental policy changes. So as you can see, the entire timeline was 1990 to 2003, which basically means when science is closed, the entire process of innovation and everything gets impeded. 13 years when we could have done something about climate crisis on environmental policy, we could not because we did not have enough data to work on it. This particular case study is present at NASA TOPS module, which is NASA's open science arm. The particular paper, I will put the link in the chat box so people who are interested can go and go through this paper. It's very interesting case study. Please go through it. So today we will be discussing about open science infrastructures. We will be discussing what are open science infrastructures and how does this UNESCO recommendation on open science, what does it say on open science infrastructures, why they are needed, and open science infrastructures are needed for innovation. This is something that we have constantly heard yesterday as well. But what is exactly open innovation? And what does it mean within the Indian context? Just to give you a quick overview on what it says about open science infrastructure in the UNESCO open science recommendation. These could be either virtual or physical research infrastructures, which basically means these could be some sort of repositories or physical spaces where people can come, work together and collaborate. And these places are open for communities to work together, to put their data together, or have some sort of data access. So do not worry about reading all of this. Do not worry about all of this. All of this material is present in open access and it will be made available to you soon. So before we move further, I would quickly like to run a poll for all our audience who are present here today. And I would like all of you to participate so that it gives us an understanding on okay, we started to have some answers. I would request all our audience to kindly participate. Okay. Just last 10 seconds, and after that I will close the poll. So yes, everybody who has not participated in the poll, please do so now. I'm waiting for at least 75% of the audience to participate. Well, that's great. Okay, so I will end the polls now. Share the things. So, of all the attendees, we've asked how many of you are familiar with the concept of open science is infrastructure, and only 61% who have voted, they say they are somewhat familiar. We've asked if you've used any data repository, 59% have said yes. And are you familiar with the concept of fair data? And well, 41% are somewhat familiar and only 5% are familiar on what is fair data. Then we have asked if you are familiar with the concept of open innovation. 43% have said yes, while 57% have said no. So, okay, with this, I think we are ready to move into the next segment, in which I will invite upon our experts so they can act, because it will be a very enlightening and very interesting session for all of you. So for the next segment, I will call upon our expert, Dr. Francis Jayakanth, who is currently a senior scientific officer at the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, India. He has done PhD from Bangalore University from the Department of Library and Information Sciences. He joined the National Center for Science Information IISc in 1986 and worked there till April 2012. And after that, there was a merger of NSCSI with JRD Tata Library, and he worked over there from 2012 till 2014. After that, he worked in Central and Technical Services Library at the Institute of Management, Bangalore. From 2016 onwards, he joined back the JRD Tata Memorial Library, IISc Bangalore, as Senior Scientific Officer. And what he has not mentioned, that IISc has its own data repository, which is like one of the biggest data repository for paper publications, and he has been associated with it. It's called ePrints, and I will leave the URL in the chat box. Please have a look through it. It's going to be very interesting. And Dr. Francis, with this, I would hand over the floor to you. Please. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pragya. I'm just sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kindly confirm if it's visible.
It is visible, sir. It is visible. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Very good afternoon. I take this opportunity. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Pragya for the kind introduction. I also would like to thank all the members of the organizing committee members and Dr. Pragya in particular for the opportunity to share my knowledge in introducing the data repository as a pillar of open science infrastructure. I'm by no means an expert in data repositories. In fact, I'm just trying to set up one for our institution. In fact, I've been at it for quite some time, but for various reasons, it still continues to be in the prototype stage. So it has not yet gone critical. So I'm hoping to do so in the very near future. Okay. Yes, as Dr. Pragya mentioned, I'm quite familiar with the concept of institutional repositories with respect to research publications. In fact, our institute has been a pioneer in establishing an institutional repository. We did that almost a quarter century ago, when the concept of open access to scholarly literature was catching up, and we were one of the earliest, not just in India and in the entire world itself, to have set up an institutional repository. Now, the concept of a data repository is more or less the same when you compare it with the institutional repository. But the concept of data repository came up much later than the concept of institutional repositories for research publications. The institutional repository concept is almost a quarter century old, and data repository, I reckon, is about 10 to 15 years old. Okay. So kindly excuse me. I'm not sure if I've turned on my video. Pragya, is my video on?
No, so your video is not on.
Okay, should I make it on, or is it okay if I don't?
So if it suits you, whatever
Okay.
suits
No,
you.
okay. Usually I prefer to turn off the video because I come very close to the monitor because of my myopic condition. So that may not be a good sight for the audience. So I hope the audience is fine if I turn off my video. So once I complete my presentation, I will turn on my video. So please do excuse me because of my myopic condition. I have to come very close to the monitor. Okay. Okay. So this is the outline of my presentation. Okay. So I won't be talking about open science at all because as I saw in the opening remarks by Dr. Pragya, so it has already been touched upon or has been dealt with in the first session yesterday. And I'm also not going to talk about the 8 pillars of open science as recommended by the European Commission. So what I will be focusing on is on fair data, and then how does one manage data, and the principles that make research data fair. Okay, so I'll be focusing on that. Okay, so I've included the first 2 slides just for the sake of completeness. Okay. Now, as we know, researchers in different fields use different ways and means to collect research data. So in the case of biological sciences, the researchers will conduct lab experiments and gather data. And in the case of social sciences, the researchers may undertake field work to gather the data that they're looking for. And when it comes to archivists and historians, they may visit the archives, they may visit the libraries, they may refer to old historical data to gather the data that is needed to undertake their research work. So different fields, different disciplines have their own ways of collecting the data that they need for their research work. Now, irrespective of the way by which data is collected, it is obvious that the data collection is one of the important, if not the most important, very, very important aspect of the research process itself. And it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time to collect data. Now, having collected the data is analyzed, and then inferences are drawn, okay? And then the research publications happen. Then researchers are awarded degrees, okay? So till that point, as far as the researcher is concerned, data is very critical, okay? Now, the question is, what happens to the data which has been so painstakingly collected for a research process once the objectives of that research process is completed, okay? Now, not too long ago, when a survey was conducted, this was in 2019 or 20, most of the researchers gathered or collected data on their personal computers, managed the data on their personal computers, and then all the inferences were drawn, all the scholarly outputs that came out through the analysis, and all the degrees that were awarded based on the theses and dissertations. Now, a good number of researchers, more than 50% of them, they did it using their personal computers. Now, the question is, now there's no problem in as such in using a personal computers to carry out collection for data analysis, everything. But the question, the big question is, what happens to data when the entire research process is completed and the objectives are achieved? Now, in large number of cases, that research continues to stay on personal computers, and then because of various reasons, it could be a hardware failure, it could be a OS problem, it could be data corruption, and in large number of cases, that data vanishes without a trace. Okay. Now that's where okay. So that is as far as data is concerned. Okay. Now, in the context of open science, now fair data is one of the pillars of open science. Okay. Now, research data. Now, what principles should research data adhere to in order to qualify it to be called as fair? Now, FAIR is an acronym which expands to findable data, accessible data, interoperable data, and reusable data. Okay. So now, if a data adheres to these principles, then it is called as fair data. Then it becomes one of the pillars of open science. Okay. Now, to manage data, and in order for the data to adhere to the principle of fairness, the data should be part of a data repository. So only a data becomes a fair data only when it becomes a part of a data repository. Okay. So now many of the information professionals or professionals who are working in the libraries and information center, they're all very familiar with the concept of institutional repositories for research output, research papers, but the same cannot be said with respect to a data repository. Okay. Now, the concept of data repository is quite similar to the concept of institutional repository for research publications, but then the importance of curating and preserving data for long term, okay, is being emphasized only much later than when the concept of when the open access movement itself caught up almost 25 years ago. Okay, so now just as we have open source software for various activities, be it a content management system or be it for a digital library, there are open source software meant for setting up and maintaining a data repository as well. So as we go along, we'll see a couple of open source software that can be used to set up an open data repository. Okay. Now, every institution may not have the required infrastructure or the required wherewithal to set up their own data repository. Okay. So thankfully, there are more than one free data repositories, okay, which are being internationally maintained by a very reputed centers, okay, which the researchers and institutions can make use of to curate and preserve their research data. Okay, so what role does a data repository play in terms of open science? And what are the challenges in setting up and maintaining data repositories? And then just a quick recap of what I'll be discussing about in the conclusion. Okay, so this is the brief outline of my talk. Okay, so So as I said, I just included this for the sake of completeness. So you, most of you have already attended, and as per the poll that Dr. Pragya conducted, or reasonably familiar with the concept of open science. Okay. Now, open science, as we know, is a movement. Okay, and the aim of this movement is to make science more transparent, make it more collaborative, and make it more accessible. Okay, so that is the idea behind open science. Okay, now there are two components which are very vital to achieve these aims of open science. So one is open access. When I say open access, it refers to open access to research publications, okay, and then other scholarly content, and then the research data itself, okay, which is gathered by scientists across the fields in whatever ways that are relevant to them, and then not just research data. So one component is open access, making everything openly available as far as the scholarly communication is concerned, and then research data that aligns with the FAIR principle. Okay, so these are the two important components that support open science. Okay, so now I'm not going to talk about the 8 pillars. Okay, it's going to be discussed, or probably it's already discussed, or it will be discussed in the future. So just for the sake of completeness, I included this slide. Okay, so coming to FAIR data. So now in the introduction, I said that different disciplines use different methods to collect data, and then having collected data, having drawn inference, and then how do the researchers make such data which adheres to the principle of fairness. Okay. Now, first of all, as I said, the data has to be part of a data repository. Okay, only then it becomes, it adheres to the principle, it adheres to the FAIR principle. Okay, so now, so the first principle of finding research data. Okay, so how can one easily find research? Now, it's not that the data that has been gathered or that has been generated for a research project is unique for that particular project. Okay, it's not so. Okay, so there could be other research projects which could have a relook at the data that has been used as a part of a different project. Okay, or they can build upon the data that is already existing. So in that context, so it can't be said that every research project will have its own unique data set that may not be useful or relevant in the context of other research projects. Okay. Now, how does one make data easily findable? Okay. So for that, the data has to be part of a data repository. Okay. So when data is going to be part of a data repository, then it has to be described, and it has to be described with rich metadata. So as we know, metadata, there could be different metadata element sets depending on the different different disciplines. For example, people working in the area of astronomy and astrophysics, they may have a metadata vocabulary that is unique to them. And there may be a data set which is used in a different context. So that may have a totally different metadata vocabulary. Okay. So depending on the field in which the data and the method by which the data has been collected. And when it is being ingested into a data repository, one has to use the metadata elements that are relevant to the discipline for which the data is pertinent to. Now, it's quite possible to have a very common set of metadata elements to describe any set of data. Now, that will be too generic and that will not be able to make the data very findable. Okay? So using discipline-specific metadata elements to describe data that has been gathered for a particular discipline would make that data more findable. Okay. So describing data with rich metadata is very important. And then one such important element that is used to describe data is the persistent identifier. So it could be DOI, for example. Okay. So when we are describing data, so we'll have to make sure that a persistent identifier is assigned to the data set that is being described. Okay. Now this will make sure that that particular data set that is being described is uniquely identified globally. Okay. So that's the big advantage of using a persistent identifier like DOI. Okay. So so how do we achieve the principle of findability? So we describe data with a rich metadata, and one of the metadata elements has to be a persistent identifier. And then ensuring that the metadata that is used for describing a data set, okay, from a data repository is indexed by search engines like Google and other search engines. Okay, so we talked about the first principle of being able to find a data for which metadata plays a very important role. And part of that metadata element is the DOI, which uniquely identifies that data set, and not just uniquely identifies, it makes it persistent. Okay, so it uniquely and persistently identifies that data set. Now, accessibility and authentication and authorization. Okay, so the data that one is looking for is available from a particular repository. Okay, so there may be authentication and authorization that is required. Okay, so authentication is one where a user identifies himself or herself as to who they are. Okay, so having been authenticated, you may not be entitled to access everything in that particular repository. So whatever you have been authorized to access, so you will be able to access from that repository. So that's where the authentication and authorization comes into play. Okay, so authentication is verifying one's identity, and authorization grants or denies access to specific resource or functionalities. Now, when it comes to finding and accessing data, it's not just for humans, for human consumption. Okay, so it is also for machine-to-machine accessibility. Okay, so there may be other protocols or other APIs which may access the data. So again, the authentication and authorization is relevant whether it is being done humanly or the process is automated.
Dr. Francis, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I may need to rush you.
Sorry?
I believe I may need to rush you because we are going.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So I have quite a few slides. Okay. Okay. Now interoperability. Now, this is the third principle, which is interoperability. Now, now our data may be distributed. Okay, so now you may have some data in Excel format. You may have some data in databases. You may have data as flat files. Okay, now these data sets, okay, which are in different formats, which are in distributed systems in various other data repository. Now, interoperability is the ability in being able to integrate the data, which is in different formats, okay, which is distributed, and the ability to being able to integrate this data, okay, so that it can be used for analysis, further analysis, can be used for storage, and it can be used for processing. Okay. So that's what interoperability is. Now, reusability. Now, this is the ultimate goal of the FAIR data. Okay. Well-described metadata and data enable replication and combination. Now, one of the key things to make the data available is somebody can replicate that. Okay. So you have analyzed the data, you have made some inferences, and when you make that data openly available, somebody else can replicate your research. Okay. Okay. So as Dr. Pragya was giving an example. Okay. So what is a data repository? Now, data repository is a tool that serves as a database infrastructure to collect, manage, and store data sets. These data sets can be used for analysis, reporting, and for sharing. Okay. And data repositories ensure that valuable data is preserved and archived for long term. Okay. So apart from making the data openly available, so the most important thing is valuable data should be preserved and archived for long-term usage. So an institution can set up its own data repository. Okay. So as I said, open source software are available for setting up a data repository. So depending on what the institution's requirement is. So as I said, different open source software are available. So one has to select the software that is suitable for one's requirement. And then one has to install and configure it, and then customize it as per the needs of the institution. And the most important thing and the most difficult thing is populating the repository. Okay. So as has been the experience with the institutional repository, setting up a repository is not a difficult task, but populating a repository and sustaining a repository, now that's a huge challenge. So Dataverse is one popular open source software. CCAN is a very popular software. Many governments across the world are making use of CCAN to set up data repositories to preserve government data. And DSpace, which has been a very popular institutional repository software, can also be used for a data repository as a data repository software. Okay. Now, it's not necessary that every institution has to set up its own data repository. Now, it's quite possible that, as I said in the beginning, it may not be possible for various reasons for every institutions to have their own data repositories. Now, luckily, there are a number of freely available data repositories. Okay. Now, some of these repositories are established by European Union, and it's being operated from the CERN. Okay. It's open. It's open for everyone. Okay. So it ensures safe storage of research data, and it assigns DOI for every data set that gets stored so that it becomes citable, it becomes persistent. Okay. And it supports large file sizes. and it can be up to the size of 50 GB. And I think beyond certain limit, very nominal charges are applied. Okay, so up to a certain level, it's completely free. So an institution should definitely explore this option before trying to set up their own institutional repository. And of course, once the data is part of Zenodo or Figshare is another one, then it is open access. So what role does data repository play in the concept of open science? It accelerates progress. Okay, so now someone need not reinvent the wheel. Okay, so they can make use of the existing data set and draw fresh inferences or build upon that. Okay, and it preserves a scientific record. Okay, which is very important. Help prevent of data loss by maintaining a permanent record of research data. Now, common challenges in maintaining data repositories. Now, data, if they're available in data silos, then it's not going to serve any purpose, and it's not going to meet the principles of fair data. Okay. Okay. So now, I mean, this is in the context of individual institutions trying to set up and maintaining their own data repository. Okay. Now they'll have to ensure that there is a data quality and cleansing. Now, data quality and cleansing, of course, it is not the responsibility or the onus of the maintenance of the data repository institution, but it's the responsibility of the individual research projects or the individual researchers.
Dr. Francis, I think we will need to ask you to.
Okay,
yes.
So I'll just conclude. Data repositories are crucial in advancing open science. So by providing secure, accessible, and well-organized data sharing platforms, they empower research and foster collaboration and enhance scientific reproducibility, which is the core component of the open science. Okay, as institutions embrace principles of openness and transparency, investing in robust data repository becomes essential for advancing knowledge and improving society. So the institutions itself should take a proactive step in promoting open science and in the process supporting data repositories. So all stakeholders, be it researchers or institutions or policymakers, should advocate open access, and which will ensure that data is freely accessible and easily discoverable and makes meaningful impact. So these are some of the references that I've used, and thank you for your presence and patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis. And to the audience, if you have any questions for Dr. Francis, please put it in the Q&A and Dr. Francis will respond to your questions over there. And there are currently 2 questions by Sushma Kumari on what is the purpose of conducting the seminar, and by Alameen Chaudhary on could open science reduce human capability of thinking and creativity. I would like to address both of these questions first. Firstly, to Sushma Kumari, I mean, I believe you may have missed yesterday's session in which we discussed about what is the point of open science and how does it help you. For example, if you want to do a paper and you are missing a very important information and you know that there is another publication which has covered it, but you go over there and then you do not find that paper because it is behind a paywall, it impedes your research. At the beginning of the entire seminar, I talked about one particular case study which basically showed how closed wall when your research is not in the open, when your research, your data is not in the open, your publication is not in the open, it impedes the entire scientific ecosystem. The idea of research and science is innovation, and how it basically adds to the how we can actually quickly collaborate, because quick collaboration and having access to all this information increases the speed of innovation, which also helps me answer Alameen's question. Well, for creativity and that human capability, how is it impeding it? It actually increases it, right? To give you an idea of the COVID vaccines, everybody thought, like, how are we going to create a vaccine so quick? But COVID, in some way, that COVID vaccine was a breakthrough because we were able to get all that information and create that vaccine in the fastest amount of time possible, only because everybody was putting their data, all their research, everything on open access, which basically mean all the collaborators, all the scientists and researchers across the world can have access to that data, to that research, to that publication in open. And when there were like so many minds working and collaborating on that, it resulted in a fast innovation, which brings me to a very good segue to our next talk by Professor Hemant Kumar, who would be actually discussing basically about this. We talk a lot about innovation when it comes to open science. Open science accelerates innovation because when you are putting out your data, when you're putting out your research for access to everyone, a lot of people are collaborating to find solutions using all of those common resources. It increases innovation. But then what exactly is innovation and what exactly is innovation in Indian context? So on this, Dr. Hemant Kumar will talk to us. He teaches at the Department of Studies in Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, School of Sciences, Central University of Gujarat. And his key academic interests are Indian science and technology history, informal sector and grassroots innovations in science and technology and innovation diplomacy. And he is also currently the principal investigator of DSP Center for Policy Research at Central University of Gujarat. So yes, with this, I will quickly hand over the floor to you, Dr. Hemant.
Thank you, Dr. Pragya. And I would also like to thank Dr. Sri Rajesh ji for inviting me to this lecture. So the title of this talk is Locating Grassroots Innovation in the Discourse on Open Innovation. So I'm sure since yesterday, you have heard a lot about open science, open innovation. I am introducing a new term, grassroots innovation. I don't know whether you are aware about this term or not, but in last 2 decades, this term has also catched up in many ways. And people are looking into this, idea of grassroots innovation. So I hope I'll try to, first, present you the idea or concept of innovation, and I'll try to also trace the genealogy of this word innovation, and then present, some models of innovation. And then I'll come quickly to open innovation, and then introduce this concept grassroots innovation. And at the end, I'll discuss, a few cases of grassroots innovation and how they can be, looked from the perspective of open innovation. So this word innovation, I'm sure that, if today I say that, this person has done this innovation, so today, everyone will appreciate that person because, it has a positive connotation. But when this term or concept was used for the first time, it had a very negative understanding or negative connotation. And that's what, Godin has, explained when he was trying to look into this, genealogy of this term innovation. So this term was, initially found in, it has, Greek origin, and this was referred as kinotomia, which you can, see on the slide, highlighted in yellow. So this term was coined as a kinotomia in 5th century BC, when there was a scholar named Xenophon who introduced this concept in the context of opening new mines, and that idea was positive in a sense that he was introducing a new way of using those mines, but other scholars like even Plato, Aristotle, and Plebus and several other scholars, they suggested that we should not allow innovation because this might hamper the existing order of the society. Okay, so that's why these popular philosophers also, they didn't suggest it. And in fact, in religious philosophy, this has also a very negative understanding, and they suggested that innovation should not be allowed in the society. And this understanding continued for more than 1,000 years. And in fact, this barrier was broken at the time of scientific revolution, and further, at the time of industrial revolution, when people started appreciating this idea of innovation, that this can also bring positive change in the society. So you can see that this term innovation has traveled a very long time, and it has changed from a very negative understanding to positive understanding. Okay, so largely this credit goes to one person, Schumpeter, who was the first person who tried to define this term innovation. And in fact, he also referred this term as a creative destruction and several other things, which was, again, if you look into the history of this idea of creative destruction, it has come from the Hindu philosophy. I'll not go into detail of those things, but this has also linked with some philosophical tradition in Hinduism. Where Lord Nataraja has danced, and then he destroyed the world, and that story goes on, and that has been basically that story has traveled from India to Europe through religious philosophy, and then from religious philosophy some economists like Sombart and other people borrowed that idea, and they brought into the field of economics. Okay, so that has a different history. So Schumpeter suggested 5 different dimensions to qualify anything or any theme to be called as innovation. Okay, like implementation of goods, implementation of new production, opening of new markets, or use of new sources of raw material, and implementation of new forms or new organization. Okay, so these five things are important to be called as innovation. And one important thing that innovation Schumpeter attached to these 5 things is that commercialization is very important aspect. So unless until you're not commercializing these 5 things, you cannot call it as a innovation. They might be invention, but they are not innovation. There is another differentiation Schumpeter made that is also categorized as Schumpeter Mark I and Schumpeter Mark II, where Mark I is basically individual innovators were given this responsibility of innovation, to whom he called as entrepreneurs. So this idea of entrepreneur is also given by Schumpeter. So that is called it Schumpeter Mark I, where he studied some individuals in 18th and 19th century in US, like Edison and Graham Bell and other people. Then by the Second World War, he changed his ideas that not only individuals but large corporations are responsible for bringing innovation in the market. So that is considered as Schumpeter Mark II. Okay, so if you see the literature, around 70-80 years after Schumpeter was dominated by Schumpeterian understanding of innovation, where commercialization was very important aspect of any innovation. However, there are other scholars from other fields of knowledge, like history, sociology, economics, and other fields. They said that innovation should not be strictly limited to the idea of commercialization, but there are other dimensions are also important, and we should look into those things. Like even if someone is coming up with some kind of different creative ideas that may not necessarily be commercialized, but we should consider that as innovation. In fact, if someone is coming with some new design, that can be also considered as innovation. So in last 30-40 years, you'll find that scholars have contested this idea of the definition of innovation, which was largely followed followed in Schumpeterian tradition, and scholars are suggesting that we should not limit by that definition, and rather than debating on definitions, let us think about how innovations are happening. Okay, so the process of innovation became very important for the scholar. So 50s onward, different scholars have come up with the different models to explain how innovations are happening. And if you understand the process, then we can replicate in other contexts also. So with that idea, different models were proposed, and so in the beginning, when people had no idea how innovations are happening, so that period was referred as black box model. Then linear models of innovation, where innovation is like technology push or technology pull model. So different models are there. I'm not going into detail of all these models, but for us, this 6th generation model, which is again highlighted in yellow color, that is important. And that started around 2000, when this idea of open innovation was given by Chesbrough, and he explained that how these open innovations are important. And currently, this 7th generation is going on, where open innovators or individual innovators or user innovators are basically important actors in the process of innovation. So Chesbrough has defined this innovation as open innovation as a distributed innovation process based on purposively managed knowledge flows across organizational boundaries, using pecuniary mechanisms in line with the organizational business model. So he is suggesting that innovation should not be limited with organizational boundaries, but this open innovation is more than that. And sometimes it's users of that innovation and community of users of innovation are also important, and we should allow them to participate in the process of innovation. Okay, so innovation has a multiple direction. In earlier models, like we saw this different generations of model. So they are somehow very very closed, or they are not able to incorporate knowledge or innovations from outside the firm. But this open innovation has at least allowed people from outside the firm to participate in the process of innovation. So that's where this and in fact, there is another scholar, Eric von Hippel. He has, suggested the idea of free innovation. That is also somehow very closely linked with this idea of open innovation. Now, I'll come quickly to this idea of grassroots innovation and how that is linked with this, open innovation model. So again, I mean, this grassroots innovation is not a very new concept to India. In fact, this is based on Gandhian and Tagorean philosophy of so Gandhian philosophy of Charkha and Tagorean philosophy of rural reconstruction program, where they have suggested that we should bring innovation or knowledge from the base of the pyramid. Okay, so actually they did not use this base of pyramid. This is again used in today's context, I mean by the Western scholars, but they have already thought that if you want to develop our rural communities, then we have to think about these kind of technologies, that how these technologies with the people can help them and develop them. So with that idea, they started this grassroots innovation paradigm. And in fact, there is also when we are talking about open science, so we have to also look into the history of science, how science has progressed. Not only innovation, but science also. So science has also very negative understanding in the very beginning, and it took long time for different philosophers to prove that science is good for the society. And in fact, in that process, many scientists were they were punished, like Copernicus. He was killed. So it also took a very long time. And in fact, the 19th century science was a kind of open science model, where each and everyone can participate in the process of science. not like today, where only experts are supposed to do or practice science. In 19th century time, anyone who is interested in working on science, they are allowed to participate in that process. In fact, they can make their own devices, they can develop their own mechanism to do experiments and several other things around those things. And even the availability of raw materials was not limited to a few people. It was easily available and accessible to each and everyone. So it's up to the person who want to do those kind of science. They were allowed to do the science or practice the science, and that's why Brooks called it as a republic of science. However, the science is this so-called modern science started progressing, and by the end of 19th century, it started changing its nature, its language, its entire aspect, the way science was used. And by the First and Second World War, it was completely changed. And people started referring it as a big science, because the scale of that practice of science and kind of money was involved, the kind of science groups were involved, the kind of publications were involved. So everything was at big scale. So that's why that period of science was considered as a big sciences project. And the important change has happened that the earlier even lay people were allowed to practice science. By the mid of 20th century, only expert and science were supposed to practice science, and these lay people were excluded from the practice of science. So earlier they were part of production of knowledge within the science. Now they are only receiver or consumers of the science. Okay, so these kind of major changes has happened from the beginning of 20th century till the mid of 20th century, and that's why now and it has other repercussions also, and that's why now there is a need for bringing up open science or open innovation kind of framework. So in that context, this grassroots innovation, they still represent this idea of open science, which were present in the early 19th century period. And this is also very important in the context of global south, where most of the population is engaged in the informal sector. So in many African countries, you will find that around 90% of population is engaged in the informal sector. In fact, in India, around 80% of population is engaged in the informal sector. So rather than looking at informal sector again from a very pessimistic way, we should try to understand and develop an optimistic approach towards this informal sector knowledge. So in that context, knowledge or different kind of innovation is produced by these informal sector workers is very important, and that's where this Indian government started this National Innovation Foundation in around 2000, and they have started recognizing grassroots innovation. And so far around 3 lakh databases of grassroots innovations are there in Indian context. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but I have mentioned here 4 or 5 cases, and how they are basically closely associated with the idea of open innovation can be discussed from these cases. Like the first figure is this person is Uddhav Bharali from Assam, northeastern part of India, and this person has done several innovations. Okay, and all those innovations are awarded by NIF, and and some of them are recognized by outside agencies like NASA and other places. And so basically he suggested that when he was young, he faced a lot of problems due to unavailability of various technologies in his rural areas, and he always try to overcome existing problems in the society by bringing up new technologies, new innovations. And now he said that I have started some kind of training mission in my locality, and I'm inviting around 10 to 15 local youth and I train them how to do innovations, and that training facility is free of cost, because I don't want what I faced in my youth days, the youth should face in today's time. So that is his idea of open innovation, where he's allowing young people to come to his workshop and get training without paying any money. In fact, he is paying some kind of fellowship to these people to attending those workshops. Then second photograph is this Murugnatham. I mean, most of you might have watched this movie Padman. So that Padman movie by Akshay Kumar is made on this person's life story, and he innovated sanitary napkin pads in an informal setup. So now this person has decided that he will commercialize his technology only through the rural women SSG. Okay, he will not sell this technology to someone who is coming from the formal sector and he wants to take a huge profit out of that technology. But he decided that this technology should be promoted through women SSG, and he trained these women to produce sanitary napkin pads. Okay, so it's not only solving their health problems, but also that is kind of income generating activities for these women. Okay, so that is his idea of bringing or coming up with open innovation. Then the right side machine is basically Pochampalli sari making machine. So here innovator has seen his mother suffering from sari making process, so he decided to solve her problem. So he innovated this technology. The middle picture is of Bullet Shanti, and this innovator has in fact at one point of time he patented his machine Bullet Shanti, and he got US patent. Okay, but after some time he decided not to further manage that patent, because on the one hand it's costly, another is that it also prevents others to replicate this kind of machine. Okay, so he wants that others should also, I mean if those who are interested, they can make this machine without paying any royalty to him. And the last picture is on the left side is onion transplanter by Pandharinath More from Maharashtra. Okay, so his idea of bringing this innovation is that he said that I have learned a lot of things from the society. Now it's my turn to repay something to the society. So I want this technology to be commercialized, and he invited private players to commercialize, but with one condition, that they cannot charge huge money or huge profit on that technology. So basically he wants to help onion transplanter in Maharashtra region. So Nasik is a onion belt. So there he's commercializing his technology without charging any royalty on his technology. Okay, so these are few cases of grassroots innovation where they are opening different kind of avenues where people from the informal sector, without having any proper educational background, without having any proper financial background, without proper any support from the formal sector, these innovators are coming up with ideas to serve the society. Okay, so and why I'm presenting these grassroots innovation cases, because in the example of open science and open innovation, yesterday also like Pragya was mentioning that fab labs and then science shops and other kind of ideas are promoted. That is fine. I mean they are basically Western concept, Western developed in the Western context, and they are now being promoted in the Indian context or the developing countries context. But actually we should also think about innovations which are local to these countries, and they are context specific, and they have more appeal to the local context. Okay, so that's why I tried to discuss these cases of grassroots innovation. So I'll stop here, and I think I have not taken much time, and
Sir,
so thanks.
and it was an amazing presentation. from you and from Dr. Francis as well. I mean, if you can see our chats, it's kind of buzzing with all four questions and the Q&A box as well. So, Dr. Francis and Dr. Hemant, can you please address some of the questions which are specifically aimed for your presentations in the Q&A box? And Dr. Hemant, I have to admit, I mean, the concept of involving the community in the entire process of, innovation and everything is basically, it's very important. And this is something now, after the entire paradigm shift in the science, open science is also kind of addressing that. It is also discussing about bringing in the communities and solving the problems locally. And so these are some of the questions that we will be unpacking tomorrow in the open engagement of societal actors. And in our among our audience, there are actually few people who are from Knowledge for Change Consortium. Knowledge for Change Consortium is part of the UNESCO Chair's initiative, which basically does this kind of university community, basically just to solve these problems involving the community and to promote such kind of grassroots innovations as well. So I think one of our audience members, Dr. Sonal Jharia Mills is also here. So ma'am, if you can actually engage with us through the chat section, and yes, please put your questions in the Q&A box. So
shall I answer to these questions?
Yes, please.
Because these are very interesting questions, and so is it essential for all innovations, including grassroots innovation, to have a scientific or technological rationale, or are there scientific basis necessary? I don't think so. Basically, this grassroots innovation, if you look at the characteristic of grassroots innovation, most of these innovators, they don't have any proper educational background or proper formal schooling. Okay, so they are working on some small shops, or working in their field as a farmer, or doing some small kind of work. And most of them are class 5 dropout, class 10 dropout, so they don't have any proper scientific education or technological training. Okay, despite that, they have come up with these kind of fascinating innovations. So I don't think, I mean, it is essential for any innovation to be scientifically or technologically so there should be any scientific or technological rationale for that. In fact, if you look into theoretical debate on how technologies should be defined. Okay, so earlier there was this understanding that technologies are basically implications of science. Okay, like if there is a biotechnology, so it is basically implication of development of sciences. But later on in 60s and 70s, scholars have refuted this idea, and they said that there are various technologies exist without understanding of science. Okay, so for example, wheels were there without understanding of science of wheel. Okay, or fire was there without understanding of fire. Okay, so similarly, these technologies can exist without having any rationale of science. So that is first thing. And then the second question is, can it be applicable for any field? I don't know. I mean, are you asking about this idea of grassroots innovation or open innovation? So if you can clarify on that, then I can answer to this question. But if, for example, if you're asking about grassroots innovation, so the whole idea of this grassroots innovation is that these innovations are developed by grassroots communities without support of any formal sector institutions. Okay, nowadays there are various attempts are going on to replicate them in other areas, like some innovations from Assam, they are being replicated in Gujarat. But the whole idea of this thing is that let the local people decide what kind of innovation they are want to come up with, or how they see the challenges in their life and how they want to resolve those challenges. Okay, so not necessarily they are replicated in other fields, but if there are some kind of learning one can find from the innovation in another area, then definitely those should be allowed. I mean,
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Hemant. Dr. Francis, there is one question which I think would be very interesting for you to answer, which is by Victor Rocco on, do you think it is possible to build a university repository 100% full of all research outputs produced by the authors of the institution, considering the restrictions of some journals? So since you were part of the team that was associated with ePrints, I think you are the best position to take this question.
Yes. Am I audible, Pragya?
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay. So the question, if I have heard you correctly, is that is it possible to build an institutional repository to accommodate all the research output of an institution? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Considering the restriction of some journals. So yes.
Okay. Yes, it's possible to ensure that 100% of research output of an institution is part of an institutional repository, irrespective of what the open access policies promoted by the publishers. Now, different publishers have different stake with respect to putting a copy of research publication on an institutional repository. Now, about 75 to 80% of the publishers allow the preprint version to be included in an institutional repository. Of course, there are dedicated preprint servers, but apart from that, the institutional repositories can also have the preprint versions of the research publications. And many of the publishers also facilitate the post prints, that is the peer-reviewed versions of the publications to be included on the institutional repositories. So it is very important that the institution that is maintaining an institutional repository should ensure that what the publisher's policies are with respect to putting a copies of the research output of an institution on their respective institutional repositories. But whether a publisher permits or doesn't permit, I think the preprint, without too much worrying about what the publisher says, the preprint version can definitely be included on the institutional repository. And as I said, most of the publishers allow postprint. Now, the postprints are those which have been peer-reviewed, but in terms of content-wise, they are not similar to the published content, but the content-wise it is same, but the structure, the layout of the content is different from what one would see on the publisher's platform. Yes, so it is possible by using different ways and methods to accommodate every research output of an institution to be included in an institutional repository. But it is very important to have a mandate for an institution that they should have an open access mandate, which makes it mandatory for a researcher to submit a copy of their accepted paper to the library to ensure that such papers get into the institution repository. I hope I have answered the question.
You have, sir. So since we are actually running very low on time, there is one post-session poll which I would request everybody who is here to take. And while we are waiting for everybody to respond to it, and I hope a lot of you participate in that poll, there is one last question for you, sir, which is by Manohar Prasad Prabhu. And the question is how confidentiality is addressed in open data.
Pragya, can you please repeat the question? What is addressed?
How the question of confidentiality is addressed when data is made available through open data repositories.
Okay, so data which adheres to the FAIR principle, the second principle is accessibility. So in order to have accessibility to a data, you need to have authentication and the accessibility. Now you authenticate yourself, that is you identify yourself as to who you are. And then what you are authorized is controlled by the institution that manages the data repository. So by now, for example, let's say one is using open source software like CCAN or one is using open platform like Zenodo. Okay, so now you can say whether the data is openly available or the data is restricted. So even in the case of your own repository, so you can have different authorization levels wherein you can allow what you want to allow, and then you can give the required permissions or licenses to the data that you allow, and you can also, for whatever reasons, it could be sensitive data, it could be awaiting a patent. Okay, so you can grant or deny access depending on what the requirement or what the situation demands. So it is fully possible to have different layers of accessible control in a data repository.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much, Dr. Francis. Thank you so much, Dr. Hemant. Okay, I think we have more questions rushing in. So we are actually slightly bit on the upper side of what we had thought. We are running a bit overboard. So I suppose, Victor Rocco, you actually have a lot of questions for Dr. Francis. Would it be better if I actually put you in touch with him directly? Because I think he'll be happy to have a discussion with you regarding institutional repositories.
Sure, I will. I'll be happy to clear all his questions.
So please send us all your questions that you have for Dr. Francis or Dr. Hemant, and I'll be happy to connect you both. And we will try to resolve all your queries. But since we are running out of time, so I think we will end the session soon. And I'm ending the poll now. I will share the results of the polls today, the post-session assessment polls. So how do you envision the future of open science infrastructure impacting the research landscape? The options were accelerating scientific discoveries, fostering greater collaboration, increasing transparency and reproducibility, enhancing access to research outputs, or all of the above. And 74% of you have voted for all of the above. What type of support or resources would you need to engage with open science practices and infrastructure? And I guess the answer is kind of distributed between capacity building, adequate IT infrastructure, and access to funding opportunities. So do you believe that government and funding agencies should prioritize investing in open science infrastructure? And an overwhelming 92% of you have voted yes. Then there was one quick question on what is fair. And 62% of you have voted for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, which is absolutely correct. And the last question was, how likely are you to utilize open science infrastructure in your future research endeavors? And 62% of you have said very likely, which is great, which is exactly what we had wanted, which was exactly the result that we were hoping for. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and staying till the end, all the participants, and especially to Professor Hemant Kumar. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was very illuminating for all of us, and that was very interesting for me as well personally, because we keep on discussing about innovation in the entire open science discourse, but we never looked into it with that lens, like what exactly is innovation and how do we go about it? And that was an incredible talk. And as Dr. Francis as well, that was a very great overview and great insight into what is data repositories, how they are helpful, how they are important to this entire open science discourse, and what is fair data and how it actually helps in this open science and open innovation discourse. So I think with this, we are good to close the session today. So thank you, the audience, thank you, speakers, and tomorrow we will be discussing about open engagement of societal actors. We will be discussing about different aspects like citizen science, how you can crowdsource your data, how you can engage with the communities directly. So please come back tomorrow as well at the same time. And yes, hopefully I'll see most of you tomorrow as well.
Okay, thank you, Pragya.
Thank you, Dr. Pragya. Thank you, Dr. Hemant. Good to meet you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. With this, we will close today's session.